I know there's a lot of questions about what's going on in Syria, so I'm going to explain it to you in about a minute. And then we can go into some more detail about how this is going to impact us, that whole counterterrorism, national security thing that we worry about. So, Assad, a dictator, has been at war with his people for 20 years. The Obama administration, the Trump administration, everybody had trouble figuring out how to resolve this war where a dictator is effectively bombing and burning his own people. Not the kind of thing the US stands for generally, but it wasn't just the US. The opposition had Turkey involved. You had some militant groups. This is where the rise of ISIS comes from. And then Assad had the backing of Russia and Putin, and then some Iran elements too. So the involvement in Syria had the potential to be the place where a world war would break out and take over the whole region. Nobody wanted that either. So kind of stuck in a stalemate. The United States has had the United States has had special operations forces in there secretly for the last 10 years. They've been targeting ISIS specifically, right? Take out those extremists that could potentially harm the US. And somehow, in the last 6 months, when most people weren't paying attention, one opposition group that used to be called Al Nusra Front, but they had a nice little rebrand as HST, they started winning. And suddenly, the last couple of days, Assad flees, just runs away to hang out in the Kremlin with Putin. So this is a big deal for the nearly 12 million people who've had to leave their homes, 7 million Syrians. Remember that whole Syrian refugee crisis when we were watching families fleeing on boat and being rejected in Europe, people drowning, all of that, that never got resolved. And so now you have all these refugees who desperately want to get back to their homeland, but you also have people in Europe saying, oh, now that war is kind of over, we don't need to take you anymore. We're not going to listen to your asylum petition. So all these refugees and displaced people got to figure out what's going to happen to them. There's about 1 million of them in Germany. Big deal. Putin, who also had invested deeply in a war in Ukraine, suddenly losing power in the Middle East. He's got no foothold there. Total egg on his face. He's also completely stretched thin with his army. He had to conscript and pay for soldiers from North Korea. So Putin's on the back foot. Iran disappears. They get out of Syria too. They're like, whoa, we want nothing to do with this because they're also losing with Hezbollah and they're losing with Hamas. So the bad actors, what some like to call the axis of evil, are retreating. So what does that leave in Syria? Is it going to be this massive vacuum? Well, it leaves these leaders of what used to be al-Nusra, what is now this rebranded group that is still on the US terrorist list. They are going to try to put together a functioning democracy. And they have said they will protect the rights of minority religions. They have no interest in harming people. But we've heard that before, right? We've heard that from, that was the Taliban. The Taliban that the United States went to defeat, and then they ended up coming back, right? They also tried to rebrand and say that they would be totally aligned with the ideals of a democracy and pluralism. So that remains to be seen. And the last thing to keep an eye out is the fact that Israel totally taking advantage of this power vacuum and temporary chaos. Israel already has the Golan Heights, right? Syria, that's their territory that they occupied after the 1947 war. They have now continued beyond that and started targeting strikes and moving into more territory in Syria. And they entirely destroyed the Syrian Navy. So we're now looking at a Middle East where Israel is the dominant country. It's an ally of the United States. But I don't know. It's a big country, big space, worth keeping its eye on, because let's not forget, if we don't stop the terrorist counter-terrorism extremism activity overseas, American history shows it does come to hit us here at home.